Millionaire thought he was marrying an ugly woman in arranged marriage, but he was shocked when she— Hello everyone, before we begin today's story, I have a small favor to ask. Please hit subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you never miss our channel's new videos. It is quick, free, and the best way to support us in bringing you more dramatic stories. Your support means the world to us. Where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments below. Thank you very much. Now, let us return to our main character. On a warm spring afternoon, the grand ballroom of a luxury hotel in New York City glittered with chandeliers and whispers. Guests filled the room, elegantly dressed, yet buzzing with rumors. Everyone was waiting for the arranged marriage between the young millionaire heir of the Anderson Group and the mysterious bride he had never met before. Ethan Anderson, the groom, stood tall in a black tailored suit, his jaw clenched as he scanned the hall. His eyes betrayed not joy but resignation. For weeks, he had resisted this arrangement. Yet his family insisted, reminding him of their empire, their legacy, and their duty. Ethan was a man who built his fortune with sharp intelligence, not blind obedience. He despised the idea of marrying a stranger for business. Whispers floated around him, like arrows cutting into his pride. They say she is unattractive, that is why her family pushed for this deal. Poor Ethan, marrying a woman he does not even love. Do you think he will even look at her face? Every word stung, feeding the storm in his chest. Ethan clenched his fists, his mind racing with questions he dared not ask aloud. Who was this woman? Was she truly as terrible as the gossip claimed? And why did fate, cruel and relentless, trap him in this farce? The sound of footsteps silenced the room. The bride appeared at the entrance, her face hidden beneath a heavy white veil. The lace shimmered under the lights, but the veil was so thick that not even the outline of her features could be seen. She walked slowly, her movements graceful, her hands clutching a bouquet of white lilies. Ethan's heart thudded, not with excitement, but with dread. He saw her veil as a curtain of deception, a mask hiding the truth. To him, this was not a wedding. It was a contract, signed in chains. The officiant began speaking, his words echoing across the hall. We are gathered here today. Ethan's mind drifted away. His thoughts were filled with bitterness. He told himself, I will endure this for 1 year. 1 year to satisfy the contract. And then I will walk away free. As the vows were spoken, Ethan's voice was steady but cold. He looked at her veil, not at her eyes. The guests leaned forward, some with pity, some with anticipation. The bride's voice, soft yet firm, carried through the hall. She did not tremble. Her tone was calm, even dignified. When the ceremony ended and the applause filled the room, Ethan forced a smile. To the world, he was a groom. To himself, he was a prisoner. He whispered under his breath, a promise only he could hear. This marriage is nothing more than a performance. My heart will remain untouched. But little did Ethan know, beneath that veil was not the woman of cruel rumors, but someone whose truth would shatter every wall he built and challenge every belief he held about love, dignity, and fate. And so, the curtain of their story rose, not on a tale of convenience, but on a storm of secrets, revelations, and a love that would test the very core of who they were. The limousine pulled away from the hotel, its tinted windows shutting out the world's curious eyes. Inside, the silence between Ethan Anderson and his new bride was heavier than the leather seats they shared. The wedding had ended only an hour ago, yet the distance between them felt like miles. Ethan kept his gaze fixed on the city lights, jaw tense, refusing to look at the veiled woman beside him. At last, he spoke, his voice clipped and cold. Let us be clear. Whatever happened today was not about love. It was business, a contract arranged by families. I will keep my word because my name demands it, but do not expect anything else from me. The bride lowered her head, her hands folded neatly in her lap. She did not flinch, nor did she argue. Her calm silence unsettled Ethan more than tears would have. When the car reached the Anderson estate, the grandeur of the mansion stood in sharp contrast to the chill between them. Chandeliers blazed in welcome, servants bowed, yet the air was suffocating. Ethan led her inside, his footsteps echoing through the marble hall. At the base of the staircase, he stopped, turning to face her for the first time. "We will set terms," he said firmly. "We will live under the same roof, but in separate rooms. We will appear together at family dinners and public events when necessary. To the world, we will act as husband and wife. But behind closed doors, there will be distance. After 1 year, when the contract has served its purpose, we will part ways." The bride's veil shifted slightly as she nodded. Her voice was steady, quiet, but resolute. "I understand." Ethan searched for a flicker of resentment, a sign of weakness, but found none. Her acceptance felt almost too easy, too composed. He turned away abruptly, climbing the staircase without another word. That night, the mansion was silent. Behind the heavy wooden doors of their separate rooms, two lives had been bound together, not by affection, but by obligation. Ethan sat in his study, staring at a glass of whiskey he did not drink. His thoughts churned. He felt trapped, but also curious. Who was this woman who wore silence like armor? Why did her calmness stir something uneasy within him? Down the hall, the bride removed her veil in solitude. Her reflection in the mirror revealed a face that was far from the cruel rumors. Yet she touched the glass with a faint smile, whispering only to herself, "1 year is enough. I will endure." The house stood as a palace of wealth, but within its walls began a fragile truce, a marriage cold as stone, sealed with rules and distance. But beneath that icy surface, cracks were waiting to form, as secrets, pride, and unexpected emotions prepared to collide. Neither Ethan nor his bride knew it yet, but the contract they treated as a cage would soon become the stage where dignity, deception, and love would fight for dominance. And in that fight, hearts would be broken, truths would be revealed, and nothing would remain the same. Days turned into weeks, and life inside the Anderson estate followed the cold agreement Ethan had set. To the outside world, they were the perfect newlywed couple. They appeared at business dinners, charity events, and family gatherings, their smiles polite and their gestures practiced. But once the cameras were gone and the doors closed, the silence between them returned, sharp as ice. Ethan buried himself in his work, often leaving early in the morning and returning late at night. Yet even in his absence, the presence of his bride lingered in the mansion. Servants whispered about her kindness, about how she spoke to them with respect instead of commands. Ethan pretended not to care, but every time he overheard such remarks, a flicker of curiosity tugged at him. One evening, after a particularly grueling day at the office, Ethan walked past the library. The door was slightly ajar, and inside, he heard the faint sound of pages turning. He paused. Through the gap, he saw her sitting by the fire, her veil removed, though her face was turned away from him. A sketchbook rested in her lap. Her hand moved gracefully across the paper, capturing the glow of the flames and the shadows of the room. For a moment, Ethan forgot himself. The sight was disarming. She was not the timid, silent woman he had imagined. There was strength in her stillness, purpose in her strokes. He lingered there, unseen, until a servant passed by, forcing him to move on. The next morning, Ethan noticed something else. In the kitchen, she stood with the chef, sleeves rolled up, helping prepare meals for the staff. She laughed softly, her voice warm and genuine. The staff, who often trembled under the weight of the Anderson family name, now worked with ease around her. Ethan's chest tightened with an emotion he could not name. Later that week, at a charity gala, Ethan observed her from a distance. She moved among the guests with quiet grace, not seeking attention but earning it nonetheless. When a waiter stumbled and nearly spilled a tray of drinks, she caught his arm gently, saving him from embarrassment. Her small act of kindness drew more admiration than any jewel she wore. Ethan found himself unsettled. He had promised to keep his heart untouched, to view this marriage as a business arrangement. Yet his mind betrayed him, circling back to the image of her sketching by the fire or smiling in the kitchen. Each moment chipped away at the wall he had built. One night, unable to sleep, Ethan wandered the halls until he found himself outside her room. A soft light glowed from beneath the door. He almost knocked, but stopped himself. Instead, he stood there, listening to the faint hum of a tune she sang to herself. It was a melody filled with longing and hope, a sound that pierced his chest more than any argument could. In the solitude of his study, Ethan confronted his turmoil. He clenched his fists, whispering, "Why does she get under my skin? Why does her silence feel louder than any words?" Unbeknownst to him, his bride carried her own questions. Alone in her room, she closed her sketchbook and touched the lilies pressed inside its pages. Her heart whispered, "Can a year of distance hide the truth of what we feel?" And so, within the cold contract, warmth began to stir. Small gestures, unnoticed by the world, became the cracks through which light seeped in. Neither Ethan nor his bride admitted it aloud, but the walls between them were no longer unshakable. They were beginning to tremble. The turning point came on a rainy evening when the Anderson Foundation hosted a large charity banquet in downtown Manhattan. The ballroom sparkled with crystal chandeliers, silverware, and the rustle of designer gowns. Ethan Anderson moved through the crowd, every handshake and smile calculated. Yet his eyes strayed again and again toward his wife, who stood quietly near the entrance, dressed in a simple navy gown. For the first time, she had not worn her veil. Whispers spread quickly across the room like wildfire. Guests who had mocked Ethan's marriage weeks earlier now stared in disbelief. Her features, once hidden, revealed a natural elegance that was impossible to ignore. She carried herself with quiet dignity, her presence commanding without a word. "Is that really her?" one guest murmured. "They said she was plain, even unattractive. But look at her. She is radiant. How could anyone call her otherwise?" Ethan's chest tightened, his eyes locked on her. And for a long moment, the room seemed to vanish. He had braced himself for ridicule, but instead, he saw admiration follow her every step. Pride, uninvited and unfamiliar, rose in him. The evening continued, but the unexpected attention drew a darker shadow. A rival businessman, Richard Hale, who had long envied the Anderson empire, seized the moment. Smiling with venom hidden behind charm, he raised his glass and said loudly enough for others to hear, "What an interesting revelation. It seems the Anderson heir has been hiding his wife from the world. One has to wonder, why?" Laughter rippled uncomfortably. Cameras flashed. Reporters leaned forward. Ethan's jaw tightened, but before he could respond, his wife stepped forward. Her voice was calm, steady, and clear enough for all to hear. "I chose silence because I wish to be seen for who I am, not for what I look like. Rumors are easy to spread, but character is harder to prove. Tonight, I hope I have shown at least a little of that truth." The room fell silent. Her words struck deeper than any defense Ethan could have given. Guests who once doubted her now nodded in respect. Even Richard Hale was momentarily silenced, though the glint in his eye promised this was only the beginning of his schemes. After the banquet, Ethan escorted her to the car. The night air was cool, rain misting over the city streets. Inside the limousine, silence stretched between them. Ethan finally spoke, his voice low. "You surprised me tonight." She looked out the window, her tone even. "Was I supposed to hide forever? If people wish to talk, let them. I will not live my life behind a veil." Ethan studied her profile, the determination in her expression. For the first time, admiration outweighed his resentment. He found himself wanting to know her, to understand the strength behind her calm exterior. But pride kept him from speaking further. Back at the estate, the storm outside mirrored the storm within Ethan's mind. Alone in his study, he replayed her words over and over. Character is harder to prove. At the same time, she sat in her room, closing her sketchbook and pressing her hand over the lilies inside. Her heart raced with conflicting emotions. She had revealed herself to the world, yet the one person she wanted to reach most still held his distance. That night, both of them lay awake under the same roof, restless with thoughts they could not share. The walls of the contract that bound them were beginning to crack wider, not with anger, but with undeniable truth. What began as a marriage of cold convenience was shifting, and neither of them could stop it. For in the heart of deception, the first sparks of real love had begun to ignite. The days following the banquet were filled with whispers in every corner of Manhattan's elite circles. Newspapers praised her beauty. Society columns marveled at her poise. Yet beneath the polished headlines, Ethan Anderson felt the ground shifting beneath his feet. Instead of relief, unease gnawed at him. His pride, already fragile from years of family pressure, twisted the truth into something cruel. He convinced himself that her decision to reveal her face was not bravery, but manipulation. Had she planned this all along? Had she hidden her beauty to shock the world and embarrass him? That night, in the grand library of the estate, the confrontation finally came. Ethan stood by the fire, his voice sharp. "You lied to me. You allowed me to believe the rumors, to carry the shame, while you waited for the perfect moment to reveal yourself. Was this your strategy? To win admiration while I stood there like a fool?" She faced him with steady eyes, her sketchbook clutched against her chest. "I never lied. I never asked you to believe the gossip. You chose to believe it because it was easier than looking at me." Her words struck like a blade. Ethan's anger flared, but beneath it was something deeper, something he refused to name: fear. Fear of being wrong, fear of realizing his own prejudice had blinded him. He turned away, his voice cold. "From this day forward, keep your distance. We will continue this farce for the world, but do not expect anything from me." She swallowed the ache rising in her chest. Alone in her room that night, she opened her sketchbook and stared at the pressed lilies within. Her fingers trembled as she whispered, "I promised myself I would endure 1 year. I will not break." But silent tears betrayed her strength. Outside the walls of the mansion, Richard Hale, the rival businessman, saw his chance. The press began to publish slanted articles, questioning whether Ethan had hidden his wife to protect her or to manipulate public sympathy. Investors grew restless, and whispers of betrayal reached the Anderson boardroom. Ethan, consumed by pride and suspicion, failed to see the web tightening around him. His coldness toward his wife only fueled the rumors. If their marriage is real, why does he treat her like a stranger? Society asked. Meanwhile, she felt the weight of the world closing in. Every time she stepped out, cameras followed, twisting her every gesture into scandal. Yet she walked with dignity, refusing to let them see her break. In the quiet halls of the estate, the distance between them became unbearable. Ethan drowned himself in work, but even in his office, her presence haunted him. The memory of her calm voice at the banquet, her strength under fire, refused to fade. One evening, as rain lashed against the windows, she passed by the study and saw him sitting alone, shoulders heavy, glass of whiskey untouched. She wanted to step inside, to remind him he was not alone, but his cold words echoed in her memory. She turned away, retreating to the silence of her room. Thus, what could have been the start of something real became a fragile bond, cracking under pride and misunderstanding. Love hovered near but could not break through, and while Ethan battled his pride, Richard Hale's schemes grew stronger, threatening not only their marriage, but the very empire Ethan swore to protect. The foundation of their contract was crumbling. Trust had never been built, and now suspicion and ambition conspired to destroy what little remained. Both hearts were wounded, both spirits strained, and the storm on the horizon promised that the worst was yet to come. The storm finally broke. Richard Hale struck with precision, spreading false documents and whispered lies that the Anderson empire was unstable, that Ethan Anderson had married not for honor but for strategy, and that his wife was the true mastermind behind the curtain. Investors panicked, the stock value trembled, and the family board demanded explanations. Ethan sat at the head of the conference table, his face grim as voices rose around him. "You have endangered the company," one board member accused. "You allowed a scandal to poison our reputation," another added. "Your marriage is a liability. If she were not part of this family, perhaps we could save what remains." His jaw tightened, but inside, doubt clawed at him. Was Richard Hale right? Had she truly brought chaos into his world? Pride whispered yes, but his heart resisted. Memories of her kindness, her calm voice, her quiet strength battled with suspicion. That evening, as the rain poured over Manhattan, the house seemed colder than ever. Ethan retreated to his study, his head in his hands. He had built his life on control, yet now everything slipped beyond his grasp. Unbeknownst to him, his wife had already made her choice. Alone in her room, she closed her sketchbook and stood before the mirror. The reflection that stared back was no longer the veiled woman who had entered this mansion weeks ago. She was determined, resolute. She whispered, "If he will not fight for the truth, then I will." The next morning, She walked into the heart of the storm. Reporters crowded outside the Anderson headquarters, cameras flashing as she stepped forward, elegant yet fearless. She raised her voice above the chaos. "I will not stand by while lies destroy what generations have built. This family has given more to this city than anyone knows. My husband does not need to defend me. I will defend him, and I will defend this company." Her words cut through the noise, forcing silence. With documents she had quietly gathered, she exposed Richard Hale's schemes. She revealed the fake contracts, the manipulated reports, the underhanded deals meant to weaken Anderson Holdings. Her evidence was irrefutable. Inside, Ethan watched the live broadcast, stunned. He had expected betrayal, but instead he saw loyalty, courage, and love stronger than pride. His chest tightened as the board, once doubtful, now applauded her bravery. Investors regained confidence, and the tide turned. That night, when she returned to the estate, soaked from rain but unbroken, Ethan met her at the door. For the first time, his pride faltered. He struggled for words, but all he managed was, "Why would you do this? After everything I said, why?" Her eyes held his, unwavering. "Because truth matters more than pride. And because no matter how you treat me, I will not let lies destroy what I married into. This family name is mine now too." Ethan felt the walls inside him crumble. The woman he had dismissed, ignored, even resented, had just saved everything he had worked for. And she had done it not for power, not for recognition, but for integrity. As she walked past him into the house, Ethan remained frozen, her words echoing in his heart. For the first time since their marriage, he questioned not her motives, but his own blindness. The battle with Richard Hale was not yet over, but something had changed irreversibly. Ethan Anderson had seen the truth of his wife, and that truth would haunt him until he found the courage to face his own heart. The following days were a storm of reflection for Ethan Anderson. The company had steadied, investors were calming, and Richard Hale had been forced into silence by undeniable evidence. Yet Ethan could not rest. He replayed every cold word he had spoken to his wife, every moment he had doubted her, every wall he had built. For the first time, he realized the greatest threat to his marriage had never been Richard Hale. It had been his own pride. Late one evening, Ethan found her in the garden, seated on a stone bench beneath the glow of lantern light. Her sketchbook lay open, though her pencil rested idle. The night air was crisp, the scent of rain lingering. He approached slowly, uncertain, his heart pounding harder than in any boardroom battle. "I owe you an apology," he began, his voice unsteady. She lifted her gaze, calm but cautious, waiting. He forced himself to continue. "I was blind. I believed the whispers because it was easier than trusting you. I let pride guide me, and in doing so, I nearly destroyed us." For the first time, Ethan lowered his defenses, his tone stripped of arrogance. "You saved my family's name, not because you had to, but because you chose to. I do not deserve that kind of loyalty, yet you gave it freely. Tonight, I choose to do what I should have done from the beginning. I choose truth over pride. I choose you." Her breath caught, but she said nothing. Silence stretched, broken only by the rustle of leaves. Ethan reached into his pocket and withdrew the pressed lilies she had once kept in her sketchbook, now carefully preserved. He held them out. "These reminded me of you, gentle but unyielding, beautiful but stronger than anyone sees." Her eyes softened, tears glistening though she fought to contain them. Slowly, she closed the sketchbook and took the flowers into her hands. "You speak of choice," she said softly, "but choice means action. Will you stand beside me, not just in public, but here in truth? Will you protect not only the family name, but the heart you once dismissed?" Ethan stepped closer, his voice firm. "Yes, I will fight for this marriage, not as a contract, but as my vow. I will no longer hide behind duty. I will no longer let pride keep me from what is real." The night seemed to hold its breath. For the first time, the walls between them cracked wide open. The garden, once a place of solitude, became the ground where two hearts finally met, not in silence, not in distance, but in choice and truth. And though shadows still lingered beyond the mansion gates, a new fire burned within. It was the first step toward redemption, and the beginning of love not bound by contract, but by conviction. The days after Ethan Anderson's confession brought a quiet shift to the mansion. The air no longer carried the weight of icy silence, but something gentler, fragile, yet real. Their interactions, once mechanical, began to soften. At breakfast, he lingered at the table instead of rushing away. In the evenings, she no longer dined alone, but found him waiting to share a meal. Small changes, simple moments, but each one stitched together a fabric of warmth neither of them had expected. One morning, Ethan discovered her in the greenhouse tending to roses. The sunlight spilled across her face as she brushed soil from her hands. He stepped inside, watching her with quiet admiration. "You belong here," he said softly, surprising even himself. She looked up, startled, then smiled faintly. "I belong where I am allowed to grow." His chest tightened at her words, for he knew she spoke of more than plants. Their evenings often ended in the library, where she sketched by the fire while Ethan read reports. Yet more often than not, his eyes drifted to her instead of the pages. One night, he asked, "Why lilies?" She lifted her gaze from the sketchbook. "Because they survive storms. They bend, but they do not break." He nodded slowly, realizing she spoke of herself. The city outside continued to buzz with curiosity about their marriage. But for once, Ethan did not care about gossip. When photographers caught them walking together at a charity hospital, his hand resting gently on her back, the headlines shifted. "A united front," the papers declared. But behind the posed photographs was no longer just performance. It was a truth taking root. Still, shadows lingered. Ethan knew Richard Hale had not surrendered, and challenges would come again. Yet as he watched his wife laugh softly with children at the hospital, as he felt her hand brush his when they returned home, he knew something unshakable had begun to grow between them. One evening, standing by the balcony overlooking the city lights, Ethan turned to her. "I once promised myself this marriage would be nothing more than a year. Now, I cannot imagine a future without you." She looked at him, eyes wide, her voice barely above a whisper. "Do not promise me forever if you cannot live it." He took her hand, steady and sure. "Then I will live it, one day at a time, proving it until forever becomes real." In that moment, beneath the glow of the city, hope bloomed. It was not dramatic, not forced, but steady, like the first light after a long storm. The contract that once chained them was gone, replaced by a choice freely made. And with that choice came the warmth of something new love that was not bound by duty but by devotion. The following months brought change not only to the Anderson mansion but to every corner of Ethan Anderson's life. The man who once carried himself with icy pride now stood beside his wife with quiet devotion. Their appearances at events were no longer stiff performances but reflections of genuine unity. Where there had been tension, there was now ease. Where there had been silence, there was now laughter. The final test came in the spring, when Richard Hale made one last attempt to destabilize the company. He leaked forged documents suggesting financial fraud within Anderson Holdings. The scandal could have destroyed them, but this time Ethan did not face the storm alone. Standing at a press conference with his wife at his side, he spoke firmly. "This company has endured because of truth, not deception. And this marriage, once built on contract, now stands on love and loyalty. No rumor, no scheme can undo that." His wife then stepped forward, presenting clear evidence that dismantled every one of Richard Hale's lies. Her voice carried strength, her presence unshakable. The reporters, once eager to doubt, now applauded. The Anderson name emerged stronger than before, and Richard Hale's downfall was swift. Back at the mansion, Ethan took his wife's hands in his. "We began with a veil, with distance, with pride. I see now that what I feared most was never you, it was myself. You showed me that love is not weakness. It is the greatest strength." She looked into his eyes, her voice tender but certain. "Then let us no longer live under shadows. Let us begin again. Not as strangers bound by duty, but as partners bound by choice." Weeks later, the grand hall that once witnessed their cold, arranged wedding was transformed. Friends, family, and staff gathered as Ethan and his wife renewed their vows. This time, there was no veil hiding her face, no contracts binding their hearts. When Ethan spoke, his voice trembled not with reluctance but with love. Before, I promised 1 year. Today, I promise every year to come, for as long as I live. The applause that followed filled the hall with warmth. Their kiss sealed not a contract but a future freely chosen. And so, what began as a union of obligation became a love story of resilience, redemption, and truth. In the end, the millionaire who thought he was marrying a stranger discovered that the greatest fortune was not wealth, but the woman who stood beside him. Their story was no longer whispered in scandal, but celebrated in admiration, a testament that true love is not born from status or appearances, but from authenticity and action. And in that truth, they found not only justice, but joy, and a love that would endure beyond every storm.